excited to be in church today? I know I am. So, Mom's sermon this morning was so great about being in season and out, right? And whenever Dad asked me if I could preach tonight, I was like thinking, I don't know what I'm going to preach. What am I supposed to talk about? God, you got to help me. I don't have any idea. But me and Harmony recently have been reading 5 chapters of the Bible each night whenever we can. We're trying to read through the whole Bible throughout the year. And I was like, okay, maybe I can get something from all my notes from that, because every chapter I've been writing down, like every time I read it, I write what I learned from that chapter and kind of like try to do like a deep study, sort of, in the best way I can, praying like, God, what do you want me to learn from each chapter I read? So I was like, maybe I can go through my notebook and look at that. I probably have something in there. And me and Harmony still hadn't done our study that night, and so I was like, Harmony, let's go. We went and got some food at Sonic and sat in the parking lot and read the Bible and like wrote notes and stuff. It was like a little nice thing. And I passed by, we were reading the book of Joseph. Not the book of Joseph, the chapter that talks about the story of Joseph. Said that a little backwards. Sorry, guys. The chapter where it talks about Joseph, which is actually in 2 chapters, and it's not like how some of them, it's like 1 chapter and then the next chapter. It's 1 chapter, and then it has another chapter, tells a whole different story, and then it goes back to Joseph. So I don't know if that's like a chronological thing or something, but like I was like, this is really interesting. Like it like totally skipped a chapter before it finished the story. And so I'm going to like look up into that a little bit more later on. If y'all want to, y'all can. But I'm not going to read both whole chapters to y'all tonight, because that might take a little bit of time. And even though I know we probably have some time, I have other stuff I want to talk about too, not just the story of Joseph. So I'm just going to kind of give y'all a rundown of the story. And if y'all want to read it later, it's in Genesis chapter 37 and chapter 39. But we're going to kind of get a rundown. I know most of y'all probably know, but we're just going to do an overview, right? So like Joseph, he's not the youngest. There's one right under him, but one of the youngest of Jacob's sons. There's 12 of them, and Joseph is Jacob's favorite son, right? And in the Bible, it says that the reason why he's his favorite is because this is the child that he had in his old age. So all his older brothers don't like Joseph because he's the favorite child, and they're like, why am I not the favorite? I'm the oldest child over here, or I'm the middle child over here. Why can't I be the favorite, you know? And one day he gives him, his father gives Joseph this colorful coat, and the brothers are always like, they're like, why did he get this colorful coat and I didn't? Like, what in the world, Dad, you know? And they're just over here plotting against each other, like, what can we do to Joseph? And Joseph, of course, is like Daddy's favorite, so he's always tattling on his brothers, like, Daddy, they over there, they didn't count the sheep correctly, and now you're missing a sheep or something. You know, who knows what they're saying, but he's always tattling on him, okay? And so one day, Jacob's like, hey, Joseph, go to your brothers out in the fields and, like, check on them and stuff. So he goes over, he's skipping through, and he's like, I'm going to go talk to my brothers. And Joseph is like, doesn't think anything. He doesn't think his brothers hate him that much, you know? And right before this, Joseph had been telling his brothers these stories. And he's like, I'm going to be the king, ruler of all this stuff. And if you think, back in the day, the youngest doesn't become anything. Now, at least socially, it's not. There's many occasions in the Bible whenever, of course, that doesn't happen. King David, he was the youngest, and he became the king. But typically, if you're the youngest, you're not going to be some king or ruler or anything like that. And he's telling his brothers this story. He's like, oh, these bundles of hay, they were like bowing down to me and stuff. Y'all were the bundles of hay. Y'all were bowing down to me. Then later it says about the whole story, the stars bowing down to him. And they're all like, Joseph, you think you're going to be greater than us? You're like this little kid. What? You know? And they're all jealous of him and all this stuff. So he comes skipping along and in his colorful coat, like proud because he has this colorful coat and none of his brothers do. And like, I'm the favorite, wah, 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 right? And his brothers are like, we got to do something about this guy. We don't like him. Our father likes him better. If we just get rid of him, our father might like us more, you know? So they do this whole plot. They beat him up, tear his colorful cloak, and throw him in this well. Jubin, he was the, pretty on Joseph's side. I don't want to hurt him. He's my brother. I might not really like him as much, but he was I'm going to come back and get Joseph and, make sure he's good. But the older brothers kind of did something behind Jubin's back. Reuben, and was sold him to these Egyptians, right? And then got an animal, dead animal, put the cloak dipped in the dead animal's blood and brought it to their father. Now, the brothers didn't lie to the father. They didn't say, look, your son's dead. I noticed that because my entire life I thought they went to their father and said, your son is dead. But no, it actually says that he brought the cloak, the bloody cloak, to their father and said, look, isn't this your son's cloak? They didn't say, look, your son is dead. They said, isn't this your son's? And he's like, oh, my son must be dead. And he grieves and all this stuff. And he's in the assumption that his son is dead. Reuben goes back to the well, and he's like, brothers, what did you do to him? What? And they're like, oh, yeah, we sold him to the Egyptians. Right. Fast forward in time, Joseph is with Potiphar, who bought him from the Egyptians. And because of God, it specifies this in the Bible. Because of God, he worked his way up. Everything prospered for Potiphar because of God. Because God worked through Joseph, and everything in Potiphar's house went great. Okay? So at this point, if you're an outsider, you see this and you're like, first off, everything's going great for Joseph, but also everything's going bad because his brothers hate him, right? And then everything is going bad for Joseph, and if you're looking in a scope into his life, you're like, what is wrong with, what is God doing to Joseph? He's doing, all this bad stuff is happening to him. He's being sold into slavery, gets taken away from his family because he's sold into slavery, and then he becomes a slave, and he's having to work up in here, and then he gets to the top of the top slaves where he's right underneath Potiphar, and then they're like, okay, well, stuff is finally going a little bit better for Joseph, right? And then Potiphar's wife is like, Joseph, come in this bedroom with me. And Joseph's like, no, you're my master's wife. And Potiphar's wife is like, you're just a slave. I can do whatever I want to you. And so he runs away, and then Potiphar's wife lies about him. All this stuff. He goes into jail, and then he becomes, and notice this, though. Every place he goes, he becomes the top of the top. He becomes right underneath the guards because of who? God. Because of God. If he didn't have God on his side, he would still be the lowliest of the slaves. He might have worked his way up a little bit with his own strength or whatever. But if he didn't have God on his side, he would not be up there at the top, and he would not have made it up there, right? So he tells these people come to him, and they're like, I had this bad dream. And he's like, well, the dreams are kind of God's business, so let me pray to God and see if he can give me the answer to y'all's dreams. So he answers the one dude's dream. He's like, you're going to prosper. You're going to go back to the palace. So the other dude's like, ooh, that was a really good interpretation. I want you to tell me what my dream is. And then he's like, you're going to die. And he's like, what? You just told this guy you're going to go back into the kingdom, and you're telling me I'm going to die on a stake? Imagine being in that person's situation. You're like, oh no. So that thing happened, and Joseph's like, don't forget me, because I literally just told you what your dream said. So don't forget me. Go to the king and tell him about me, and get me out of jail, please. Because nobody likes being in jail. He does forget about him. Newsflash. For 2 whole years, until the king has a dream, and he's like, I need a person to tell me what this dream is. And then the cupbearer is like, ooh, I know somebody 2 years ago who told me about my dream. You should go call him, because none of the magistrates or anything like this. None of the magistrate people or magistrate people or magicians or witches or whatever, all the other people couldn't interpret this dream. And he's all like concerned, like, what does this dream mean? And it's 2 dreams. He's like, what is this supposed to mean? And then the cupbearer's like, oh, I know someone who tells the dreams and knows the interpretation of dreams. So they bring Joseph over. He's like, well, I really don't interpret dreams. God does. You see how they're always going back to God? He's always giving glory to God. If God is doing something and you're putting the glory on yourself, those things that are going great is going to stop. If one moment Joseph's like, I can tell the dreams, and then he tells the dream, it's probably going to be wrong because he's not relying on God anymore. He's relying on himself. So he tells the dream, and he's like, so basically there's going to be this famine. So first it's going to be like great crops for 7 years, and then 7 years there's going to be this famine. So you need to put your top guy on it. He needs to be in charge of this. And then Pharaoh's like, that's going to be you. So he becomes the top dude right underneath Pharaoh. And since he's an Egyptian now, he changes his appearance so he looks more like an Egyptian. And one day, his brothers come along, hungry for food, begging their brother Joseph for some food. They don't know it's their brother, though, because he looks different. So they're over here like, please, give us some food. Like, we're really hungry. We'll pay you money, all this stuff. Bowing down to him. What did his dream say? They were going to bow down to him. So that whole thing happens. There's a whole nother story into like Joseph tricking his brothers and all this stuff, and then all that stuff goes on, which I'm not going to get into because y'all can read it for yourself if you want to know the rest, But tonight, we're talking about perspectives. So in the story of Joseph, there's many different ways you can perceive every single situation. I kind of was talking about this earlier, how one person could perceive Joseph's life over here is going horrible for him, and like all this stuff is going wrong for him. Another person can perceive it as, look at all this great stuff that's happening to him in every part of his situation. If you only look at the good parts, you can be like, he's just like everything's working out for this dude. Nothing wrong could be happening to him. Another person can perceive as like, what did he do wrong to get that kind of treatment, to get thrown into jail and to get thrown into a well. Sold to the Egyptians, my brain. So our perception is everything. The way we perceive it and the way other perceives it or perceives different situations. But whose perception matters the most? God's. It doesn't matter what all these other people around you are saying about you or what you see other people or vice versa. That doesn't matter. The only thing that matters, the only eyes upon a situation that matters is God's. If day by day we're concerned about each person, many times we have this issue with these phones and this social media that we see everybody's lives constantly and we're just like, I want to be like her. Or I want to get that many views on I want to get that many likes on on and on and on. Put these filters on our faces to make us look totally different than we are. Put these little emojis or whatever to make us look happy. Put a smile on your face for the post, and the next minute, you stop smiling because your life is not going as great as people perceive you as. I saw this one video, and it was like supposed to be funny, and it's like this one influencer was doing a video, and she's promoting this product, and she videos herself, and as soon as the ad is done, her smile drops because she's not faking it anymore. How many times in our lives and in our Christian lives are we faking it to make a show, to make people think everything is going great in our lives when we're going through a battle? Yes, we have God on our side, but if we're continuously faking it, you're not putting a good perception to these other people. if you're faking it yourself, these other people are going to have to fake it themselves because they're like, why am I going through all this hard stuff and this person over here is not going through anything? It's because they don't know that they actually are going through something. We must trust in God every single day. Joseph had to trust in God's end goal for his life. Joseph didn't know that way in the future, he was going to become right underneath Pharaoh. He didn't know that he was going to go in jail. He didn't know that he was going to be a slave to Potiphar and then get to the highest rank. He didn't know that his brothers were going to beat him up and throw him in the well. He didn't know that his brothers were jealous of him. He didn't know. How many of us have ever gone through something in our life and we just don't know what's next? You don't know the next step. How many times, I did this a few times in school because I was kind of like impatient. I'm reading a book and I'm like, I just want to know what's going to happen. And then you go to the back of the book and you just read the synopsis and then you're like, oh, this would have been a really good book if I was just patient to see the end. Am I the only one? Okay, that's fine. Well, if y'all have never done that, think of another situation like a movie or something. I don't know. But the hard thing about life is we don't know what's next. We don't know what the next scene is. We don't know when the next battle is going to come upon us, which next victory or defeat is going to come upon us. We don't know. The same reason we don't know what other people are going through. Perceptions are everything. What may look like one thing to us is totally different. Now, the funny thing about this is I've been, like, the past few weeks, I've been, like, reading these stories and all this stuff, and, like, the word perception has just been in my head, and I'll see different things, and I'm like, well, if you perceive that a different way, like, you could see that totally different, you know? And I don't know why this has keep popping in my head, and then I read this story, and I'm like, this is what I'm going to preach about. So, in Psalms 119:105, it says, your word is a lamp to guide my feet and a light to guide my path. Now we're going to take a little turn and talk a little bit about something a little bit different. What this says, it's a lamp to my feet and a guide to my path, which I had a little illustration, but then I kind of ran out of time to put it together. But I like that it specifically says a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. You're not seeing the whole forest. If you've ever gone camping or hiking, if it's dark out and you don't have a super duper bright light, you can't see the whole forest. You have a lamp to your feet or light to your path, or this is only. So when you're walking, it says lamp to your feet. So you can make sure and not fall over the stones. A light to your path to make sure no branches hit you in the face. How many times have you, I'm going to make this in a little bit better analogy. You've been in your room, say you have a little bit of a messy room, and the lights are turned off, and the switch to the light is on the other side of the room, and there's stuff on the ground, and it's nighttime, you're a little tired, and you're trying to get to your bed, and you just have your little phone light, and you're trying to see, but you still trip over some stuff. You stump your toe, and you're like, oh my goodness, that hurts so bad, and then you just fall onto the bed, and if you do like Abigail, you'll hit yourself on the frame of the bed, you know. Stuff's going to happen. No matter how much light you have, there's a high possibility you're going to trip and fall. That's what this verse is talking about. He is the lamp to our feet and a light to our path. That doesn't mean we're not going to fall. Just because we have that light to guide us doesn't mean we're not going to stumble. Too many times we think, God is on my side. Mom was talking about this earlier. We think as a Christian, everything's going to go great. I want to be a Christian. Sign me up for that. Everything's going to go great in my life finally. All these bad things can stop. No. Just because we have that light, so many times we still fall. So many times we still make a mistake. That's why we also have friends with us to help us with that. That's why we have fellowship. I love this verse also. Kind of goes along with it. Is Matthew 6:3. It says, "Don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will bring its own worries. Today's troubles is enough for today." That's so powerful, and it goes right along with the lamp verse. Worrying about tomorrow is worrying about all the other stuff in the forest. If you're worried about a bird flying in the forest and you're looking over there, it makes it easier for you to trip and fall on your worries for today. If you're too worried, okay, so tomorrow's Monday, so I need to make sure and set my alarm so I can actually wake up, go to work. I have all these projects I got to do at work, and then I have to make sure and come home in time so I can make some dinner actually, and worried, and like you have all this list in your head. But then today's church, and you're too worried about all the things that's going on in your head that you can't enjoy being in the presence of God. You can't completely open yourself up to God because you're too worried about what's going to go on later. It says, don't worry tomorrow, for tomorrow has enough to worry about. Worry about today. Our perspective many times is if we perceive a situation, we want to get ahead of the issue. And if we're trying to get ahead of the issue, we can't solve right here. If you're making a puzzle, I love doing puzzles. If you try to start in the middle of the puzzle, it's a lot harder. But if you start with getting all the edges out and then working your way to the middle, then it goes a lot faster. So that's our perspective. Our perspective, we don't need to worry about what other people think about us, what other people say about us, all this stuff. We just need to worry about us. Growing up, whenever I have sisters, right, siblings, they fight and stuff. And many times my parents would just have to say, don't worry about what your sister is doing. Worry about what you're doing because I was doing something wrong. We're both fighting. I was doing something wrong. They were doing something wrong. All I'm like is like, Mom, but Harmony did blah, 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 blah. And they're like, don't worry about what Harmony did. I will deal with her. You deal with you and figure out your problem first, right? So now we're going to talk about other people's perspectives. If you're the other person, it kind of goes along with our perspective. Other people are going to be like looking at each other and comparing them. Comparing person to person, like I was saying on social media. Comparing, oh, I should dye my hair this way because it'll look like her and it'll make me look prettier. And, oh, this person, she took all these college classes and now she's doing great for herself, so I need to do that. It says in Matthew 7:1, do not judge others, lest you will not be judged. I know that's kind of like a strong verse, do not judge. And I know this is not like specifically talking about judging others, but whenever you're perceiving other people and comparing yourself, you're judging them compared to yourself. And if you're too worried about all the other people, then you're not going to worry about your own issues, right? So we talked about our perspective, other people's perspective, but the one person who's the most important person to look to is God. Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope." God is the one who sees the big picture. He's the one who sees the whole forest. He knows which creature's going to come up next, which rock is going to come up next, which step you need to take next, so you can get to the end of the hike. He knows that. So if we're just focused on God, He will show us how to get through that path. So if we're just not worried about what other people perceive about us and only worried about what God sees us, that's how we get to the end. Now I have a little example to kind of just like a little like illustration example right before I end. But if I show you this paper, what color is it? Light blue, okay. Very specific. To you, it looks light blue. To me, it's purple. My point by this is everyone's going to see something different. I see purple, you see blue. Don't worry about what other people think. Just worry about what God thinks, and he will guide you through the way.